a city of gold, a kingdom of rings and palaces, an empire that ruled across the seas, until, in a single day and night, it vanished beneath the waves. This is the story of Atlantis, the most famous lost city in history. For over 2,000 years, people have whispered its name. Was it a real place or a myth disguised as history? Sailors, scholars, explorers and dreamers have searched for it across oceans, mountains and even under ice. Some claim to have seen ruins in the depths. Others insist it never existed at all. Tonight you step into that mystery, not as a conqueror, but as a witness. Welcome to Atlantis, the city that may have been or may still be waiting under the sea. You trace the mystery back, not to divers or explorers, but to a philosopher with a sharp quill and sharper opinions, Plato. Around 360 BCE, he wrote two dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. Inside, almost casually, he described a land so desolate and so doomed that the world never forgot it. Atlantis, he said, lay beyond the pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. Imagine a great island, larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined, set like a jewel in the Atlantic. Its capital shone in concentric rings of land and sea. Bridges arched across canals, palaces gleamed with marble and precious metals. Mainstream fact, Plato claimed his tale was no invention, but a memory preserved by Egyptian priests, passed to the Greek statesman Solon, then to his own family line. Quirky tidbit, he spoke of a mysterious metal, orichalcum, glowing red like fire. Centuries later, ingots of a copper alloy called orichalcum were indeed found in shipwrecks of Sicily. Proof, perhaps, that Plato had borrowed from real trade goods. Historians still argue whether this was history disguised as story, or story disguised as history. Picture the philosopher's students leaning in the dim firelight of the academy, hearing him describe shining towers, grand harbors, elephants roaming wide plains. Did they think he meant it literally, or did they nod politely, knowing Plato often smuggled warnings about morality and politics beneath layers of myth? The city he described was both alluring and unsettling, prosperous yet greedy, advanced yet destined to fall, and with a few strokes of ink, Plato had launched the greatest treasure hunt of all time. Atlantis, in Plato's telling, was no utopia. Its kings, descended from Poseidon himself, grew wealthy and restless. They built armies, expanded fleets, and sought to conquer the Mediterranean. The city's brilliance was matched only by its ambition. Athens became their greatest rival. Against all odds, the smaller city stood firm, defeating Atlantis in battle. This clash between moderation and excess was central to the Plato's warning. Then came the reckoning. Earthquakes split the land, volcanoes roared, and the sea rose in fury. In a single night and day, Atlantis was swallowed whole, leaving nothing but silence. Mainstream fact, Plato described his destruction as divine punishment from Zeus, angered by their arrogance. Quirky tidbit, the timescale he gave, 9,000 years before Solon, would place Atlantis around 9,600 BCE, far older than any known civilization. Historians still argue whether this was a mistranslation of Egyptian numerals, an allegory for Athens' political struggles, or a memory of some real prehistoric catastrophe. Picture it, golden palaces trembling as the ground splits beneath them, markets drowned in the rushing water, temples collapsing while citizens flee toward the sea. For Plato's students, it was a vision, both terrifying and unforgettable, a civilization that rose too high and fell in a single breath. The legend of Atlantis didn't vanish when Plato put down his quill. Other cultures carried their own echoes of lost lands and sudden floods. Egyptian priests spoke of temples swallowed by rising waters. The Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh told of a deluge so vast it wiped away entire kingdoms. And in the Hebrew Bible, Noah's Ark floated over a drowned world. To ancient minds, the sea was both pathway and predator, giving life through trade and fish, yet stealing it back in storms. Atlantis fit perfectly into this universal fear, the idea that water could erase even the grandest works of humankind. Mainstream fact: many scholars now suspect Plato was inspired by the eruption of Terra, modern Santorini, in the 16th century BCE. That blast toppled palaces, buried towns in ash, and sent tsunamis across the Iberian. Quirky tidbit: some Minoan frescoes even showed dolphins painted joyfully on villa walls, as if mocking the civilization that the sea would later consume. Historians still argue whether the fall of the Minoans was the real seed of Atlantis, or just another tragedy pressed into myth. Picture villagers on Santorini, gazing as fire and smoke poured from the mountain, unaware they were living through the very scenes Plato would describe centuries later. In their terror, a story was born of a city that rose, glittering and proud, and was lost to the waves. And so, from Plato's pen to ancient echoes of floods, the story of Atlantis kept rippling outward, stitched into myths across the world. We've seen its rise, its fall, and how ancient memories gave the legend its shape. But this is only half the journey, because the search for Atlantis did not end in the age of temples and scrolls. It carried on into maps, expeditions, and even the modern imagination. That's where we'll pick up in part 2.